Hollywood, you can't even do remakes of normal, basic movies. You took Lilo and Stitch and turned the very, very easy to understand, culturally respectful message of Ohana means family. Family means nobody left behind, into the message, Ohana means screw this family. I am off to a government brainwashing facility. Woo, baby! You are regurgitating remakes because your original creations these days have the cultural relevance of Vegemite on toast. Then, you're using the same logic and ideology that causes your original creations to all fail to change the remakes to be more like your failing products. Even if the live action remake does big numbers as a movie, it does nothing more. It does not turn into years or decades of toys, spin-off shows, games, and continue to sell. The animated Lion King movie is still going to matter 50 years from now. The live-action Lion King movie stopped meaning anything 50 days after it left theaters. If you cannot utilize a movie that is already made and just copy-paste it to success for family and kids movies, what makes you think you can reboot comedies that came out before the modern audience's parents were even born? It is easy to assume this is going to be a train wreck due to the modern audience safe on funny humor, but that is not the main thing we need to talk about because that's just a blanket assumption about anything coming out of Hollywood these days. It's kind of like calling water wet. There's another problem this movie could have that is not something that can be bypassed by just having the rare movie crew willing to toss aside modern sensibilities to try to make something that's actually good. And let's say with Mel Brooks still at the helm, pushing 100 years old and still sharp of mind despite having retired as a director not 10, not 20, but 30 years ago, he retired 3 decades ago. The last movie he directed was Dracula in '95, and now we're getting Spaceballs 2 written by the annoying snowman from Frozen. So it's pretty easy to look at this. Look at the current state of Hollywood and humor, look at all the butchered remakes and reboots and say, there is no way they will be able to make movies as unrestrained and edgy as the movies Brooks was making almost half a century ago when audiences were far more accepting. Hold up, my bad. Let's not blame audiences. When Hollywood wasn't jam-packed with a bunch of whiny, perpetually offended, uncreative wannabe politicians. However, let's say that doesn't end up being a problem. Let's say they fired their HR department and this movie is made without the input of impossible to please Karens, looking over their shoulders, vetoing every line that might trigger warning their narrative designers who think using whiteout to erase an error is an act of colonization. Spaceballs 2 has another glaring issue that is effectively unavoidable. When the first came out, everyone knew the references. And this is a problem with almost all parodies and comedies today. Everyone knew and still knows all the references from the original Star Wars trilogy. And likely the prequels too. If this movie came out right after Episode 3, it probably would have slapped. Episode 3 was 2 decades ago. Let's just repeat that so you could feel old. Episode 3 is on its 20th anniversary celebration year. Nobody knows the references from episode 7 and 9, the TV shows, the other movies, the few parts anyone remembers, like Mary Poppins, they're already a parody. But think about it this way, the Star Wars trilogy had both massive general audience appeal and one of the best, biggest fanatic fan bases. By the way, where the word fan comes from, we're talking about an army of nerds who can recite every movie and Spaceballs title sprawl to credits. Point being, it benefited from a fan base that was already extremely loyal and knowledgeable, who also became just as entranced with the parody movie, because Spaceballs was not made out of hatred or malice for Star Wars and sci-fi of the era. This is something that is very much lost today. Modern Star Wars is made by people. They hate fans, they hate Star Wars, they hate sci-fi, they hate everything that made the first 6 movies masterpieces. People won't get references the same way. The only pop culture thing nowadays that still gets easily, widely referenced today is the MCU. And even that has the asterisk of MCU before Endgame, which is now what, half a decade old? The last widely memorable, widespread, and fan-loved showing from Star Wars was the prequels. And yes, of course, there's critiques and whatnot of it, but no, the prequels were not hated or poorly received. They were normally received by a fan base that loves to get deep into something and nitpick it to pieces. Something that is vilified by the you must agree with everything modern audience writers that have a meltdown at the slightest criticism of their garbage products. Fans still remember a time when you go to a comic shop or play a D&D campaign and argue about small details, and no matter how heated it got, next day you hang out again. Zero hard feelings. Meanwhile, modern audience writers disagree with you on a single thing. They try and dox you, cancel you, ruin your life forever. We cannot coexist with these psychopaths. From the prequels, we got 2 excellent cartoons around the Clone Wars. We got a thriving, massive extended universe until Disney retconned it because they were stupid enough to think if they destroyed everything we love about Star Wars, it would force people to love the new, official, canon garbage their activist writers were planning to give us. We got some great video games, we got enough interest to completely explore a new, different era that extended the Jedi Order ideas of the time when Sith were around with the Old Republic, which had its own books, comics, 2 amazing RPGs by BioWare, a great but sadly short-lived MMORPG, and much more. But as good as the Old Republic is, probably the last good Star Wars content, even it is very far off mainstream. You're not going to be able to make references in Spaceballs 2 to Darth Revan and have people know who that is. At least that is to say, the material that can be utilized for a good parody that will be widely recognized is the prequels. Again, 20 years ago. It's like having a witty comeback to a conversation you had 3 months ago. The environment is completely different. And that is not to say Spaceballs 2 cannot do well. Maybe he still has a magic touch. Just to say that fans have a good reason to be very concerned about this. And they have multiple reasons and angles to be concerned from. It's concerning in general since humor for the last decade and a half is dead. Maybe this will revive it. But there's basically no funny movies being made, modern comedies are extremely boring, and they're stuck repeating the same handful of repetitive safe jokes that either make fun of nobody or poke fun at a very small group of people that they're allowed to make fun of over and over and over and over again. Which also makes them not particularly funny, as they're not really jokes but more projection of the writer's hatreds. All set to a laugh track which tells you this is meant to be funny, in the hopes that some people are still conditioned to just laugh along. Humor is dead, at least from corporations in Hollywood. It used to put everyone on the same level. It tells us we're all equal. You get hit the same as everyone else. It doesn't make us look at it and ask, why is someone being singled out? Why are you afraid to make jokes about this one group? Are you afraid of them? Do you hate the people that 99% of your jokes are directed at? Especially since they're not funny. Humor is not funny because half the people are trying to stay safe while they tiptoe through a minefield, and the other half are the ones laying the mines. Spaceballs and Men in Tights are still among the best comedies ever made. That was a very, very, very long time ago in a very, very, very different climate and with very, very, very different material to work from and reference to. So while I would love to see Spaceballs 2 be the best movie ever, return Hollywood to an era of funny comedy, after 100 consecutive burns, I'm just not putting my hand on this of an element again. We're just a few months away from a Naked Gun reboot. Ask yourself, what culturally recognized cop and detective dramas does it have to work with from the last 2 decades? Anything? It'd be like making Blazing Saddles today when the current generation doesn't even know what a Western is. By the way, my guess for next big comedy reboot right there, for those that want to see that one ruined, I just manifested it. It's happening now, guaranteed. I apologize for absolutely nothing. But you know what will never ruin your childhood memories? You're adopted. Don't look at me. Comment, like, and subscribe below, Orphan. And happy Father's Day.